Distinctly remember going to a women in finance event, and I was probably like 23 or 24 at the time, and I had heard like women don't ask for more money or women don't negotiate well. And I just remember being infuriated by that notion that because we don't ask for things, because we don't apply for jobs that we think we're underqualified for, that women are disadvantaged or that I could have been a disadvantaged. And so I remember storming into my boss's office, like asking for more money and asking for just more in general. And it was funny because he laughed and he's like, "You've never been shy to advocate for yourself. There's nothing more I can give you."
Hey there, welcome back to Impact Economy, the Female Frontier. I'm your host, Siona Mehta, and today we're interviewing Tanya Patwa, the head of U.S. Operations and Sales at NASDAQ. We'll be following her ambition and her journey to get to the top, but also how she navigates challenges in her daily life and in her career. If you're a young woman interested in business or finance or working on Wall Street, then this is the video for you. So without further ado, let's jump right in. Okay, so can you tell us about your current role and how you got there?
Yeah. My current role is head of U.S. option sales and managing director at NASDAQ. I've been here for nearly 10 years now, which is hard to believe. And I can get into kind of what I do in my role, but how I got here is through after college, or I went to Georgetown for my undergrad, and I got my degree in finance and international business. I was interested in both of those things, but I think from a pretty young age, I wanted to be on Wall Street, and Georgetown was a school that heavily recruits there. So I went there. I interned at Morgan Stanley while I was in school in their wealth management division. I then went on to get an internship at Citigroup in their sales and trading, and I just really took a liking to trading. Um, and then after that, when I graduated, I got a job at Macquarie, an Australian bank trading commodity indices. But I had the great fortune of graduating in 2008. And so about a few months after I started, they shut down the entire desk and part of the division. But I was lucky enough that I just started networking, and through a Georgetown alum, I actually found a job in Chicago, still trading, which is what I wanted to do. So I moved to Chicago. I was there for about 7 years trading equity options, and I wanted to move back to the East Coast and kind of diversify my skill set and learn the sales skills as well. And so I found a job at NASDAQ. And yeah, that's how I got here.
And what first sparked your interest in that field? How did you know that you wanted to get into like what you do right now?
Yeah. Well, I grew up in New Jersey, and a lot of our family, friends, and neighbors were in trading and banking, and Wall Street was just, when I was, 15 or 16, just sounded very glitz and glamorous. And I thought I would make a ton of money and it would be fun. And it has been. And I think once I realized that being in Wall Street meant, learning finance and stocks, I just started reading more about that stuff. And I thought the stock market was really interesting. And so I was just investing at a young age. So kind of sparked my interest. And I then found a school that I knew was a good feeder program into Wall Street and studied finance.
And do you have any tips for people who are also interested in starting to invest at a young age like you did?
Yeah, I think there are a ton of like simulation apps out there. I think it's just about doing it. If you have some money, getting one of those apps and just starting to invest even a tiny amount will really help you focus. Once you have a position and a name per se, you just get a lot more invested in kind of watching the stock and reading about the stock. And I think that's something everybody should do, as early as they can, whether it's with real money or fake money. And um, yeah, I did that, and it kind of really piqued my interest.
And it seems like you kind of had your life planned out from a pretty young age with getting into those feeder schools and finding schools with that
Yeah.
interest towards Wall Street. Was there ever a time where you strayed from that path, or were you always really just straight on?
Yeah, I think it's funny. I thought I knew exactly what I wanted, and I've stayed more or less along the course. But there was a time where I think naturally, you consider other things. I thought about law, I thought about medicine, but I did a summer program when I was about your age, actually, in high school, at the University of Cambridge in the UK, where I did kind of a dual course in international finance and global economics, as well as it was like biochemistry or something like that. And I think on the back of it, I was just so much more interested in the other topic, and my parents were supportive. I was very gung ho, almost irrationally so, that I wanted to be a trader, and it really lived up to all of my expectations. But I think once once I'd done it for a while, I kind of thought what was next, and I never thought I would wind up in sales or an exchange or even a large corporation per se, but I would say that's like the most I've strayed from my original path. Not that that's a good or bad thing.
Hmm. And what have been, I know obviously you use it in your job, but how else have you had that practical application of both your finance education as well as your international business education, because I know that's not as common.
Yeah, I think the workload for those two majors just was manageable, and so I added international finance on just because I've always found economics really interesting and global economics. I think that really did stem from that summer class that I took. And in terms of practical application, it's interesting. A lot of jobs on Wall Street, you assume that you need a finance background on, and these days you probably need more of like a computer science background. Um, but when I started, not a lot of people had a finance background. But for me, I think it made me feel more confident going in that I understood the overall like ecosystem. And I also just was genuinely interested in it. So it was a fun thing to study while I was at school. And I had been able to apply it in obviously basic finance, but we're NASDAQ's a global company, and I have a role that's becoming more and more global. And I think having had just even the basic understanding of currency and economics has been helpful.
And kind of moving on from that, what challenges have you faced as a woman in your career? Because I know that there's the moniker of finance bros, and there's always going to be
Yeah.
kind of that stereotype that even persists today. So, how did you navigate any challenges that you might have had to face?
Yeah. I think, things for women have gotten so much better from my predecessors. I think when I initially started in trading, I did kind of wonder what everybody was talking about in terms of women being disadvantaged or feeling uncomfortable. I do attribute that to trading being very much a career where you can measure. I'm not sure if meritocracy is the right word there, but when you're on a trading floor and you trade a certain way and have a certain outcome, I don't think anybody cares whether really what your background is or who you are, whether you're a man or a woman. I think in the corporate world, it does kind of some of those thoughts and things that people talk about um, do display themselves on occasion. Um, Navigating it is really just, I think, being true to yourself and being yourself and knowing that things are getting better. You'll always run across people that can be difficult, and it might not even be gender related, but I think just really being like authentic and true, and being a woman in whatever capacity, not trying to be a finance bro, unless that's something that appeals to people. I think has helped me in a pretty meaningful way.
And have you had any mentors or role models that have helped shape you as a person, but also as a career woman?
Yeah, I have had tons of them. Have you heard about like a mentor versus a sponsor? The
Yes.
difference between them? Yeah. So, as you know, a mentor is somebody who kind of guides you, a sponsor is somebody who actually advocates you. And I've been so lucky to have both at different points in my career, in my life, in my personal life. Usually they're people with a little bit more experience that just take a liking to you. I've had mentors that have been assigned to me that have worked out really well. But that doesn't always work when you just get paired with somebody. Oftentimes, it's just kind of a natural relationship that evolves, and it's somebody who's been in your shoes that can kind of get an understanding of what you're going through, but help you navigate it because they see who you are and what you're struggling with and why you're struggling. And I would say, really, from like the time I was an intern, I've had people just really believe in me and push for me and advocate for me, both as mentors that, can't have a direct impact to my career, but also as sponsors who've been able to advocate for me in rooms that I'm not in. And some of those mentors I still talk to here and there and go to for mentorship, which has been, I've been really privileged.
And I know that with, you know, your job, there can be explicit successes, but also implicit ones. So, is there any way that you personally describe success or you would define success, personally as well as professionally?
Yeah. I think the answer is kind of the same for both personal and professional in that, um, there are things that you can check mark and there's money and jobs and promotions and titles. But I think implicitly success to me has meant being authentic always and showing up exactly as who I am and having that work for me, not catering kind of my beliefs, my values, how I show up every day to the environment and just being who I am, evolving obviously as the years go on. I think yeah, that both in my personal and professional life. I also think being able to help people in general and people that are younger to me and young women especially that are I've had so much help along the way that when I know that I've been able to help somebody in any regard, whether it's to learn something, to help them do their job better, to help them navigate a personal or professional situation, I think has really been something that I take a lot of pride in. And I would say thirdly, just because I'm in a client-facing role, which has helped me learn so much, I think trust, the trust that I've built with my clients and not having them want to work with me, but also have enough trust in me to continue to work with me, but to help our businesses grow too, I think is something that I take a lot of pride in.
And you mentioned being a mentor for, younger people in your job as well as some of the women in your field. And is there any strategies that you think have helped you advocate for yourself or others at work?
Um, yeah, I have been a big advocate for myself from the very beginning. When I was in trading, I was surrounded by primarily men. I was the only female that was trading at the time, or I think had even ever traded at the firm, not because they weren't willing to hire female traders, um, but really because women just shied away from it. And what I noticed, and then later heard, was just that men talk to each other a lot. Even though I was part of the crew and we were all really friends, and I know they respected me, they were talking about their compensation. They were talking about different strategies. And I think it's just something that naturally happens for the same reason women tend to have more female friends and men tend to have more male friends. I never felt excluded, but I do think by not having some of that information, I was probably disadvantaged. And I distinctly remember going to a women in finance event, and I was probably like 23 or 24 at the time. And I had heard like women don't ask for more money or women don't negotiate well. And I just remember being infuriated by that notion that because we don't ask for things, because we don't apply for jobs that we think we're underqualified for, that women are disadvantaged or that I could have been a disadvantage. And so I remember storming into my boss's office, like asking for more money and asking for just more in general. And it was funny because he laughed and he's like, "You've never been shy to advocate for yourself. There's nothing more I can give you beyond what I've given you." And it was fun. Like he kind of laughed and he's like, "Don't worry, you're not one of those women." And it made me proud of myself. And I think I've told women, I told everyone, but women especially, because I think whether it's because they just don't have the information or because, we're taught at a young age to be likable or more timid, or sometimes it's just natural. There's a ton of reasons for it, but always advocating for yourself, asking for the things you want. A lot of studies out there that women don't apply for jobs if they think they don't even have one of the 10 criteria, but men are applying even if they have one of the 10 criteria. So I think that's something that I, especially like the younger women in my organization and my team, I make sure that they're always asking for what they deserve in the way that men are, not aggressively or not aggressively, but just not being shy about it.
So you're mentioning a lot about confidence and kind of being believing in yourself and making sure that you're getting the same opportunities as others by advocating for yourself. And are there any other soft skills that you think would be beneficial for young people to have when looking into the job market that they might want to put forward when trying to apply for a job?
Yeah. This too, I'll borrow just advice that I've been given that I think has helped me is, you guys have a lot of tools at your discretion. You guys have AI to help with resumes and probably agents at some point to help with job applications themselves. Whereas, and I had LinkedIn at some point in my career, but it was very much about networking, and networking is a numbers game, like sending out emails and eventually LinkedIn messages. And I remember being a little bit shy and just like, oh, I don't want to bother that person, or like, oh, I've emailed 10 people or 20 people. And I remember somebody saying, what's the worst that happens? Like, what is the worst that happens if you email 500 people or 1,000 people? They don't respond. That's the worst that happens, right? No one's going to say, hey, what are you doing, you stupid kid? Like, you're bothering me. They might not respond, right? I get tons of emails asking for help, and I don't always have the time to respond. I try to when I can, but worst case with that person having reached out is that they didn't get a response. But if you get even one response, that leads to a job, it's all you really need. And I think that that was lost on me. And I think I see that now too. I think people are just shy. Um, and it's easier in a way because you just have so much more access to technology and people, but it's tougher because everybody has that same access to that technology and whatnot. So I think, whenever you send a message to somebody, like, have it be authentic, have it be brief, but kind of state your purpose too. Not, hey, I'm looking to network, but like, hi, I saw this and I would like to learn more about this one specific thing. Kind of try to draw the person in with like what you're interested in, and kind of getting them to believe in your story or want to help you. And I think authenticity is really important there, being respectful of people's time. And then one thing I see often is, I'll get an email asking for help and then they never follow up. And I remember being in those shoes. And if I asked for help and I didn't get a respond, I assumed they hated me or didn't want to help me versus like I get hundreds, if not like 1,000 emails a day. Sometimes I flag it, but I travel and I come back. It's not because I don't want to help. But as soon as I see somebody follow up, not the next day or the next week, but within 2 weeks, it shows me that they're not just spamming, they're really thoughtful about the help that they want. And if I see it a second time, I make sure to say, hey, I'm sorry, I will get back to you. Um, don't hesitate to reach out again. And like the best is when they reach out a third time because I have forgotten inevitably. Yeah, it just takes one job, and being shy or hiding behind a computer, everyone's able to do that now. So I think just being respectful but aggressive is help. It's how I've gotten it's how I got this job actually. So yeah, that's a big one for me.
Yeah. Yeah, you mentioned being respectful but aggressive. Also, when I know that this is a problem for a lot of young women, that they kind of have a problem with the line between being humble and kind of bragging, but not bragging, but more like showing themselves off and being confident in themselves. Do you have any advice for people who struggle with that?
I am still looking for advice on that topic. I think I, it's it's a hard thing to balance, and it really depends on the room that you're in. I do think it's still one of the hardest parts about being a woman because I do see it day to day. A man says something and it's like, good job. And a woman says it, it's like, look at her, she's bragging. And so I think reading a room best you can, which is hard. It's a skill that takes a lot of time, but knowing your audience and playing to your audience in that regard, that doesn't mean you take away any aspect of the authenticity, right? You show up as yourself, but if you know your manager tends to think that a man that is boastful is like a bro and deserves a promotion. But when a woman does it, she's asking for too much, then you want to kind of manage that in a more subtle way. When there are, women in the room that are advocates for women, you want to be a little bit louder about it. I had meetings where, I've seen younger men cut off younger women, and I've stopped them and I've had the woman like repeat what she said and speak up. And so it's a balance because things aren't fair. And, as men, you're expected to be really aggressive. And as women, you're expected to be perfect in every situation. In a room that needs aggression, you're supposed to be aggressive. In a room that needs a smile, you're supposed to smile. And I say the same, to men too, that are on the shyer side. I think you should always find the line between being respectful and being aggressive. Don't assume that people know what you're contributing, but you don't have to talk about it every chance you get to. And again, the biggest factor there is going to be the audience.
And what's a misconception that people often have about women in your line of work?
God, a misconception. It's so there's finance, there's sales, there's the exchange space. I think maybe a misconception about sales and then women in sales is just that they're really, it's kind of they're bubbly and they're energetic and they're really there to get the client meetings and run the meetings, but that they don't have um, maybe the context behind the meetings. And I'll say it's not as much just a thing about women. It's maybe salespeople in general. It's like, oh, they set up the meeting and they showed up and they take people out to drinks and dinner and travel. But when it comes time to actually talk about the business or the revenue or product roadmaps, that they have to bring in, the real product people. And I'm certainly not. I have a trading background. I know that business. I know our business better than anybody, but I choose to be in a client facing role because I'm good at it. And because it helps me understand the overall ecosystem. So I would say, and I had the misconception about sales too. I remember I actually didn't get a job offer because they said, if you're going to come into our sales and trading division, you're going to have to do both sales and trading. And I said, I just don't want to be a salesperson. I don't like people. I don't want to deal with them. I don't want to be viewed as a salesperson. Like I'm a trader, I'm smart. And it's so funny to see where I've landed in not only in a sales role, but in truly believing that the sales role is the better of the roles.
And has there ever been one decision or moment that has significantly shaped your career?
Um, I hope that is yet to come, in a way that it shapes or really like defines my career. Um, I wouldn't say it's a decision, but I've had several moments that have shaped my career. As I mentioned earlier, I graduated in 2008 in finance, obviously, right on the back of, or really in the middle of the financial crisis. So, 2007 is when there started to be some doubt around kind of the stability of the market and rates. And so I had interned at Citigroup Sales and Trading Program at a time when if you interned there, unless you did something very odd, you would have gotten the job. And so once I got the internship, I just assumed I had the job. But I didn't get it because they cut half the class. And for whatever reason, I was one of the people that got cut.
Oh.
And so it was actually through a mentor that I had found at Citigroup, who didn't believe that was fair and just really helped me find a trading job in the midst of like what felt like absolute chaos, because while Citigroup was cutting half their class, so was everybody else. And so the amount of people looking for jobs out there thinking that you were guaranteed a full-time job after having studied finance was a very large number. But I had a mentor, a sponsor, kind of actually helped me find a job at Macquarie, an Australian bank in trading commodities. So finally felt like, oh my God, averted disaster. I've got this job, and I start the summer of 2008, and that is when things really start getting bad. So about 4 months into that job, they I was cut, and in retrospect, I was too young to even be panicked. And I remember that day, I was like, oh, it took forever to get the internship, and then that was a mess, and now I'm here, and now I don't have a job. And this was at a time where I really wanted to do this and I wasn't going to let anything stop me. And that's when I really learned how to network. I went back, obviously, to my mentors and connections, but it was a really tough market because people had not gotten the job to begin with. Now they're looking for more jobs. And so I started emailing everyone, just nonstop emailing and just with conviction. trying to look for a job. And something similar happened when I wanted to leave trading. It was just like, I'm going to do this. Nothing's going to stop me. And if it takes thousands of emails, like I'm going to keep going until somebody gives me the job that I want. Not just a job, but one that I really want. So I would say that like true persistence that I had to learn early has really helped me
Yeah, trying to get a job in the middle of a financial crisis is definitely probably
twice.
the
Yeah.
worst thing for a graduate to go through. And I know
Yeah.
that that can cause a lot of stress in your life, which kind of leads to the next question here. Is there any advice that you have for managing a work life balance or avoiding burnout in your life and just keeping yourself kind of sane and your mental health kind of above the water while, you know,
Yeah.
you still have to deal with your job and work?
Yeah, I think it's just being really mindful about it and mindful about it on a daily basis, but in general and on a yearly basis and adjusting that mindset and that mindfulness. Like when you start your career, you should be working all the time. Like I'm sure there are people that disagree with me, but I had no work-life balance when I started working. And then when I started working again, like my life was in large part work. Like or I take that back. I should say there was balance, but what that balance looks like changes over time. Like my life was about work and I had a ton of fun. Um, but work was the priority. And as the years went on, it remained a really big priority, but other aspects of my life started becoming more important. But I was also able to balance that because I was better at my job. Until you get good at a new job, that should be your focus if what you want is career success, right? There are people who want all sorts of lifestyles and that's where the balance part comes in. But for me, my career was the most important thing to me, and so I prioritize it accordingly, and it still is. But the extent of the hours I need to put in to have that career versus the hours I need to spend at home building my life and nurturing that life has changed. And I think having been mindful of that shift, because it happens quickly over the years, like if you're a junior person, then all of a sudden you're running a team or a division. Um, yeah, I think just being very cautious of it and no one's going to stop you from burning out. No one's going to tell you to take your vacations. Like that's on you. Again, early career until you add value. Um, just know that you're replaceable. Everybody's replaceable, but early in your career, you're very replaceable. So, you know, figure out how much you want to invest. But if you feel yourself burning out, like that's your responsibility and that's something that only like mindfulness and having that balance and like having friends and family in your life that you can talk to about the stresses at work and that can point out like, oh, you seem really stressed, or like, oh, you seem like you're a little more relaxed, and kind of getting a better understanding of where you are through your friends and family has really helped me.
Great. Yeah, that's great advice and kind of a new perspective that we haven't really heard before. So that's great. I think a lot of people do have different goals and different like ambitions that they're working towards, but I think a lot of young people certainly identify with just this like level of ambition. So it's really great to hear this advice. And is there any other advice that you would give to young women that may want to pursue a similar path as you?
um yeah, I think we've covered a lot of it in that the networking, the persistence, the authenticity when you show up to work. But one other thing I learned early on is like be be really honest with yourself with about what you are good at and what you like to do. I think another piece of great advice I got at some point was like, Tanya, you've wanted to trade as long as I've known you. Like you've gone through hurdles, like one job, two job, third job, like you're now a successful trader. But is that really what you want to do with the rest of your life? And a question this person asked me was, are you ever going to be the best trader that ever, are you going to be the best trader that ever lived? And I thought about it and I was like, I'm a really good trader, but is this where I'm going to make my mark? And again, not necessary for everybody to feel that way, but for me, making a mark in my industry and in my career was important to me. And that's when I really started thinking about like, what am I really good at? And yeah, I'm really good at trading, but I'm not enough of a quant. I don't really want to get into like the quantitative strategy type of trading that the industry is moving towards. And I almost laughed when I realized like my skill set was very much like being a people person, and that my pattern recognition and trading also translated to other things. And I took that advice and I took the sales job, which I would have laughed at years before that. And like I think back to that advice and that once I was honest with myself about what I am good at versus what I want to be good at, or like I wanted to be a trader, I wanted to be on Wall Street, I wanted to be this and I got to be that and I was good at it. But like where was I really going to succeed? And where was my edge in terms of like who I had become at that point? Like I was probably like 28, 29 at that point. Like enough enough along in my career that there were things that made me shine and there were things that I was probably okay at. And then leaning into that and not being afraid to pivot at any point. I went in with like an irrational conviction around what I wanted to do. If you don't have that, then I think starting somewhere with some interest is okay too. Like you don't have to have it all figured out. You're obviously going into college at some point, you pick a major and you'll find some element of that major or not that appeal to you. And finding a job that satisfies one element of that to start with is is a really good place to start. And once you do that for a little bit, you'll kind of learn what you're good at and what you're not. And I think, I don't know if I was taught this or just had this preconceived notion that I should, if there's something that I'm not good at, I should get better at it and I should not stop until I'm better at it. And I think, yes, when you're in school and you're a kid and maybe even a little bit after college, that is something you should be doing. You should make sure that your skill set in general is pretty well rounded. But after that, I think leaning into your strengths and not completely away from your weaknesses, but continuing to hone those, but using the things that you're naturally good at along with the things that you've learned is I think where like true career success comes from because it doesn't feel like you're consistently working against yourself to get better at something. It stops feeling like hard work. It just starts feeling like work. And I think that was it was a really interesting pivot for me. And I hope I still have another one of those at some point.
And for the last question, you mentioned kind of making your mark in your field or industry. And I know that your career definitely isn't even close to over yet. So, what kind of impact or legacy do you hope to leave in your industry or even just in your community in general?
Yeah, I do. I have a lot of things I want to accomplish in terms of my work now, in terms of like the future of the industry that I'm in, and I can get into that. A couple of things. So I'm, like I mentioned, I'm the head of U.S. option sales, and so for our U.S. options exchange business, which is the largest amongst the options exchanges. Um, I want to continue to grow our business, but I think one thing that I feel strongly about, and it is actually NASDAQ feels really strongly about, is making markets more accessible to everyone. So I work with large institutions, but I think one of the things I really like doing and thinking about is education and access. One of the things I'm working on is how to get access to US markets to countries in Asia. And that's, it's through governments and through platforms there and through access providers here. But just, as people look to invest and as our markets are some of the best, we believe ourselves to be, trusted markets, but also financial success for all. And a lot of that comes through education and financial literacy. And that's something that I hope to kind of continue to contribute in a meaningful way. But in my legacy, like, regardless of where my career goes or what successes or successes I don't have, I think if I'm like able to help those um, that come after me just be more themselves and be more confident, I'd truly feel um, I'd feel really proud of the career that I had and just being able to like, because that's having impact on people's lives. It's giving them, passing along some of the advice, but also encouraging them. But like a confident, educated, passionate, authentic woman multiplied, if I can help more than one of them, is like that is more of a legacy than, that'll add more value than anything I could ever contribute.
Well, That is the last question that I had for you. And I hope that you leave not just an impact on your industry, but also an impact on all the people that are watching. And I know that you definitely will, with all the wonderful advice that you've given for young women who might want to follow in your shoes or have the same level of ambition that you do or want to get there someday. I thank you for coming on to my channel and speaking about your career and your experience. And I really appreciate you being here and taking the time to give advice to me and all the people watching.
Of course. Thank you for having me. And yeah, good luck to everyone watching. Good luck to you. You know where to find me, so you'll always have me to come to for anything I can help with and advice. But it's a really exciting time. You have your whole life, your whole career ahead of you, and as stressful as it seems right now, there is so much excitement and fun stuff ahead of you. I'm jealous.
My key takeaway from this video, that we shouldn't be afraid to reach for the stars. We know that there are systemic barriers to improvement as women in today's society, but what we don't think about as much are the barriers that we impose on ourselves because of our lack of confidence and our lack of numbers in the workspace. Tanya Patwa showed us that in a traditionally male-dominated field, it is still possible for ambitious women to succeed, but we must have goals. As always, thank you for joining us on the next episode of Impact Economy, the Female Frontier. Thank you for watching and make sure to come back for the next video.